My name is Luke Groskin, and I am the staff videographer for the Wildlife Conservation Society. Recently, my colleague Natalie Cash and I took a field trip to the northern forests of Cambodia. We were there to document everything from vulture conservation to basic wildlife monitoring to law enforcement with rangers. Towards the end of our shoot, Natalie and I drove across the Prevahir protected forest, which stretches from the southernmost border of Thailand all the way across the southernmost border of Laos. You start on paved roads, and then you travel onto roads that are just being built as you're driving on them. And then all of a sudden the car will turn off and you're in a forest. There's a very frontier feel to the region because there's so much open wilderness, and there are signs of rapid development underway. We were headed to a ranger station called Trapien Pring, where we filmed the rangers undergoing law enforcement training provided by WCS. Late that night, some of the rangers convened and then quickly drove off through the forest. These rangers were going off to investigate reports of a gaur that had fallen to a ditch. A gaur looks kind of like a buffalo. It's got this big crest on its back that looks like muscle, and it's got a big dewlap. A male gaur can weigh up to a ton. They're just epic. And you'd think that this animal, because it's so big, you would be able to spot it in the forest, but they're extremely shy. So if they hear you, if they smell you, the whole herd will move off because they see people as predators. We made a decision that this was going to be a unique experience and a rare demonstration of what these rangers have to do in order to save wildlife. So at about 4 a.m., I, Natalie, our local guide, a man named Ott Orn, and our driver hopped into a 4x4. We were driving for 2 hours in the dark through the forest down a really bumpy road. We could have been on the surface of the moon, and I would not have known it. I had no idea where we were going. It wasn't until the sun rose that we just popped out of the forest onto a brand new dirt road. We drove on that road for about a mile, and we saw several of the guards and rangers along the side of the road. We hop out of the car, and immediately you notice it's sunrise, so the birds are all calling. There's huge stands of trees all around you, and you realize that this road is cutting right through a forest. So we walk up and you hear this heavy, heavy breathing, very low grunting, and you look down in the ditch, and there's this really huge beast. Its chest was pushed up by the mud underneath it, so you could really tell it was really struggling. From the animal's perspective, we probably seemed like a bunch of tigers about to hop on it. Every time we got close to it, its breathing got more labored. It was getting more and more stressed. To reasonably lift it out or to drag it out would take a backhoe. We're in the middle of nowhere. That wasn't going to happen. So some of the rangers had gone off to get something to actually just dig some of the mud away, and maybe the animal would free itself. To see these guards, climbing into the mud, hauling mud out. Some of them were actually digging mud away from this animal with their bare hands. They managed, after 10 minutes, to remove enough mud. It was able to lift its back legs. That gave us a lot of hope that the animal could get free, and it was lunging forward. In fact, Natalie and I were debating where we were going to hide when it got out. It was going to be angry, obviously, and it was not going to be happy with all these people around it.
Okay, where's everybody going to run when I think
You could sense that it was pushing as hard as it could. Its shoulders were shivering with energy. It just seemed like it was just about to get out. And then it kind of relaxed, and its breathing slowed, and it died. Everybody was just shocked. We were all convinced that it wasn't going to end this way. These guys spend all their time in the forest. They're dealing with poachers. It's a very dangerous job. And yet they all seemed like they'd just been punched in the gut. What they did next was a surprisingly poignant example of the dedication of these guards. They knew that poachers will kill gaur illegally and take their horns and sell them on the black market. So in order to prevent poachers from getting at it, the forest guards had to remove the animal's head and burn the body. It took them an hour and a half just to get its head off. This animal's neck was that thick. And it took 4 men to lift the head out of the ditch. And all of them collected firewood and piled it on top of the animal. and set it on fire. This brand new road was the cause of this animal's death. So I started walking along the sides of the roads, and it became very clear that there were ditches filled with mud along every part of this road. We went back to camp and explained what had happened. Tony Lynham, who was a regional advisor for WCS, specializing in law enforcement, explained to us that gaur and this other species of wild cattle, banteng, as well as wild deer and boar, all of these animals travel from one mineral deposit to the next mineral deposit, from one pond to the next pond, and they're really using all the resources of the forest around them. And WCS and the rangers know this because they set up remote cameras at key locations throughout the forest. Then Tony told us what would happen with all these new roads.
How they get caught on the roads, and you saw, obviously it's a physical barrier to movement. And if the gaur are getting caught, then animals like baby elephants could potentially get caught too. And we've got elephants in the protected forest too.
And as Tony explained this, he kept pointing to all the roads that were slicing up the forest. And you could see these roads were going to cause an even greater damage to the wildlife than just a barrier to movement.
It's going to be an access point for poachers. It's going to be an access point for people that come in and want to take some land. Then people are going to just go in there and they're going to claim the land and they're going to start to clear it. And it's going to start now.
Yeah.
And so it became really clear to us that the law enforcement training that WCS was conducting and that we had originally came to film was more important for the wildlife and the forest than ever. These rangers had to patrol all of these new roads. They had to catch the flow of poachers coming in. They had to stop people from settling in this land, clear-cutting it for agriculture or illegally logging it, and then fragmenting the landscape even more than it already was. In fact, in the days and weeks after we left, the rangers conducted numerous patrols during which they seized chainsaws, weapons, hunting equipment, and lots of poached wildlife. 2 professional smugglers were arrested, and over $10,000 of smuggled rosewood was confiscated. Unfortunately, the roads through Preva here are already carved into the landscape. But if it wasn't for the rangers patrolling those roads day and night, monitoring the wildlife, then the forest itself would get picked apart little by little, and tragedies like this gaur's death and the lessons it teaches would go completely unnoticed.